Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Latara.
Greetings, citizens.
I said Latara because...
I know. Bonjour, citizens.
I said that because it was Canada Day a couple of days ago, and I felt like, there's some French parts of Canada, I guess. We're a science fiction movie podcast. We talk about sci-fi movies every week. Can we watch a movie? We get together, we talk about it. It's really that simple. It's not rocket science, which is good because neither one of us are smart enough to be rocket scientists. So
that's true.
This episode, we're actually returning. I can't really say a franchise, but we're returning to a film. We did the Blob, the original 50s Blob, about 3 or 4 months ago, earlier in the year. And we said that at the time, we'd come back in the near future and do the 80s version, which I had never seen. I'd seen the 50s one before, I'd never seen the 80s one. So from 1988, we're going to be talking about the Blob, and we'll get into it. We'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into spoilers. Tara, had you seen the Blob, the 80s Blob specifically, before?
I'm not sure. I remember when we watched the 50s Blob thinking that I remember the Blob being a lot scarier when I watched it when I was younger. So maybe I did see this version. Because this one's definitely scarier, like if you're a kid.
Oh yeah, this one is definitely 50-50 sci-fi horror, to the point where this could have easily been a Screams episode. Had this show...
I'm sort of sorry for you guys that it wasn't, like, because this is definitely a horror film that needs to be shared.
Oh sure, I mean... There's a lot of overlap in the sci-fi and horror genres, and I think when it comes down to stuff like this, we just have to pick a side. And I feel like, I'm always going to pick sci-fi for the Alien franchise, and not just because there's more. Some of the sequels are more sci-fi than horror anyway, but I feel strongly that should be more talked about in a sci-fi context. But ultimately, there's always going to be these ones that are kind of borderline. Tim insists that Chopping Mall should have been on the Ace and not Screams After Midnight. Well, suck it, Tim. We did it.
Robots, right? Yeah.
Just because there's robots. It's still a slasher movie.
Maybe a few years from now when we're really like looking for, looking through the ends of whatever, Amazon.com to see what we can find. Maybe we'll just say, you know what, let's just do Chopping Mall.
I have no problems rewatching Chopping Mall. I'll tell you that right now. That is a masterpiece.
So I guess this kind of continues the trend of the 80s doing 50s reboots, like The Thing or
The Fly.
what's the other one? The Fly. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. It's just kind of a weird trend, and obviously there isn't as many remakes in the 80s as there is now. Like the 2000s and 2010s have been so remake heavy.
No, but this is definitely in that caliber of films where it's just like, let's do this version of the film, but like it's definitely not your mother's version of the Blob.
Which I think is actually part of why I kind of like remakes from the 80s, because it's very much, okay, movies made in the 50s are all kind of have a similar tone, they have a similar feel, they're shot a certain way, they're shot in a simpler time.
The Blob from the 50s is almost like a family horror film.
Yeah, and it even just the technical qualities of it is very kind of like, we're all on like backlots, and I mean some of this is maybe on a backlot as well, but it's all shot in very simplistic wide shots, close-ups. By the time we get to the 70s, and then obviously into the 80s, where this is made, is, filmmaking evolved a little bit, and things were a bit more cinematic, I guess, for lack of a better term. And you feel that just in how it looks. And then the fact that this movie is clearly a product of the 80s, down to the shitty teenage characters, down to the almost slasher movie-esque structure to it, and the gore and
oh yeah, and it's at a time in film before CG. So everything is like these practical, disgusting effects. Yeah,
and the effects are really good for the most part. There's a couple of things where you can kind of tell that some of the techniques between this and the 50s one are actually the same. They're just more evolved.
There's a couple of like green screen.
Yeah.
Like images of the Blob moving around where you could tell like, okay, this is definitely just an overlay of people running from a blob. That, it's a little bit like not great, but for the most part, like the effects are awesome.
Yeah, and there is a moment towards the end where there's a truck that is clearly a miniature, and it's kind of funny. But for the most part, there's not a lot of that. A lot of the effects are very much like in the I won't say on par, because it's sacrilege to this movie to say it's on par with it, but it's more in the style of something like the Thing, where there's these gruesome, gory, practical prosthetics, and a lot of KY jelly and shit, and all that stuff. So, and again, not up to the start, because the Thing might have the best practical monster effects ever done.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
But
although there is hints of Cronenberg in this.
a little bit Cronenberg, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
So the effects are really good. The cast is very interesting. I actually, like, I kept referring to the main character in my head throughout the movie as not Ethan Hawke, because he looked like a young Ethan Hawke.
I kept thinking that he was Matt Dillon, but he's not. He's Matt Dillon's brother.
Yeah,
but I kept seeing Matt Dillon in it.
He's Kevin Dillon, who I actually, now looking at a photo of what he looks like and the way I recognize him, because obviously he's quite young here compared to like most of his work. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know who this guy is. But he's without the facial hair, he's got a kind of almost like a not Ethan Hawke kind of vibe to him. Now, obviously, Ethan
I
Hawke
can see that.
is much younger, so he's a kid at this point, but still.
He's very like 80s handsome, and he's got that like he's I think he's pretty good in the movie, actually. I think all the other teenagers are terrible, but like I think he's great. I'm surprised he didn't really have like a leading man career. I mean, he didn't have the career takeoff after the Blob like Steve McQueen did.
Yeah, no. I mean, Steve
and he's
McQueen's
definitely playing the Steve McQueen part.
Yeah, Steve McQueen's definitely Steve. Well, when we talk about the differences between the two movies, like, some of the characters acted in the first one, like Steve McQueen was this troublemaker, whereas in this version, this character is clearly got a history with the law. It is definitely something of a troublemaker. So there's definitely some comparisons and parallels to be had between them.
They both ride a motorcycle.
Yes. There's a scene in a movie theater. There's a scene where people are in a diner, although the diner scene is not at the end this time. So there's definitely similarities, even if it's not like the characters aren't beat for beat. Just this character in this movie.
No, in fact, it shakes it up pretty early too, where you think it's going one way, and then like, oh, that's not our leading person.
Yeah, it does kind of a Drew Barrymore-esque, surprise, if you will. And I didn't see it coming, because I thought it was like set up kind of a trio of characters, but not so much. Some of the other characters, or the actors that I recognized in here, though, the sheriff is Jeffrey DeMunn, who you may not know that name, but you'll probably know his face. And
oh, you know his eyebrows.
He's definitely got some serious eyebrows, although he has more hair in this than I'm used to seeing him with. This is an earlier film.
Yeah, he's younger. Not like that young, but younger.
Notably, one of the names that I noticed in the credits, the co-writer of this movie was Frank Darabont, which is really interesting, because Frank Darabont went on to do Shawshank Redemption and The Mist and The Green Mile, and he's a very...
Isn't that actor in all those movies?
He is. That's where I was going with this. Is that this actor is a Frank Darabont, regular. He's a regular star of his films. So it's interesting that even this film that he co-wrote in his early days still had him there. So that's kind of cool. It's kind of like how Dick Miller's in all of Joe Dante's movies, and incidentally, Shopping Mall.
Everybody loves Dick Miller.
Oh, he's great. He's great, and he actually didn't die that long ago. He was like 90 when he died. He lasted a long time. So. Yeah, good for him.
Good for Dick.
But he's in one of my favorite childhood movies, which is a sci-fi movie, which we'll talk about someday, and that is Explorers, which does star, funnily enough, a young Ethan Hawke. There's so many full circle things coming in this episode. I'm not doing this intentionally.
This film is very serendipitous.
Yeah. Some other names just to mention. I don't know the actor's name per se, but the doctor we see in like 2 scenes is actually an actor from Twin Peaks. I'll just say...
Yeah, he looked familiar. I don't know who he is, though.
For people who have seen Twin Peaks, I'll just say, there's a fish in the percolator. You'll know who I'm talking about. What was the percolator? I don't know. So he's from Twin Peaks. And then something that's more important to us as a show, someone close to our hearts on the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Tara, later on, when I make her do the Patreon plugs, will tell you about the Transfer saga. And there's an actor in here from the first 2 Transfers movies. Art LaFleur plays Shawnee Smith's dad in this. He's the father figure. And Shawnee, we kind of glossed over Shawnee Smith. She's actually an actor who I didn't realize was as old as she was, because I first saw her in Becker in the 90s, or the late 90s, which is a sitcom with Ted Danson. He's kind of this grumpy doctor. Did you ever watch that, though?
No, but I'm familiar with it. It has a Deep Space Nine actress in it. She left Deep Space Nine to do Becker.
Oh yeah, yes, Terry Farrell. Yes.
Yeah, and her career never took off.
It did not. No.
She's now married to Leonard Nimoy's son, though.
Oh, so she kind of returned to the Star Trek family in a weird way. Yeah. But she's in there, and I always thought she was quite young in that show, but you know, she's playing a teenager, which means she's probably like 20 in this. So
yeah.
And I think because when I saw her in Saw in like 2004, I was like, wait, how old is she? Like, I don't know, she's one of these actors who I thought was much younger than she was, and then all of a sudden she was like, you know, in her mid-40s, like playing mum roles, and I'm like, oh wait, when did this happen? I thought she was like a teenager like 5 years ago. What's going on? But yeah, so clearly I never saw the Blob growing up, because otherwise no, she's from the 80s. She was in these roles in the 80s.
Are you surprised you've never seen the Blob?
Yeah, kind of. It's a sort of movie that I like. It's just complete happenstance that I just never caught it like playing at 1 a.m. on one of the TV channels as a kid, because it's a totally sort of movie that would be playing there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wish it did, which I guess is kind of spoiling how I feel about it a little bit. I mean, the premise of the movie is basically just, you know, Blob crash lands and starts attacking. Even attacks a homeless person first and starts to spread. Teenagers are caught in the middle of it, and the town's at risk. And I'll just leave it there. We'll get into spoilers later. Tara, how did you feel about the 1988 version of The Blob?
Yeah, I don't know what I was expecting from it. I think my expectations were pretty low. And I freaking loved watching this film. I think it's great. Like, it was so fun to watch. I love the gore. Like, it really is like the gelatinous cube where things just dissolve inside it. And some of the like setups and the deaths that we get are pretty hokey. They're like super. That would never happen.
I would never.
I was so into it anyway. Like, it was so fun. Like, children die in this movie. It's great.
I wouldn't have it any other way as far as those hokey deaths are concerned. No. That's what you're here for. Like, because it started off right, and even just like the glow around the font is like really 80s, and I'm like, I love 80s movies, so it's always nice when I get to like see one for the first time again, because obviously it's fewer and further between as I've seen more movies. And the music's a bit more 80s, and it's, you know, it's like high school cheerleaders. It's got your dumb high school boys talking about, you ask a girl out, you dweeb, you're too scared, and like, okay, it's a 80s high school movie. I'm getting into the vibe of this, but I don't know what to expect. But when we get to the first like proper real gruesome death, and it's like, oh, it's this kind of film. Yeah, and the practical effects are what they are. I was like, you know what? I think I'm into this. I think I'm really into this. So, I kind of love it. I kind of love it.
I've been telling like everybody that I meet, like, have you guys seen the Blob, the 80s version? You've got to watch it. I just want to share it.
It's surprisingly really fun, and I feel like it's almost a shame for the 50s version, because I feel like this movie is so geared more towards my sensibilities, and even though I love 50s sci-fi that's a bit pulpy and kind of, you know, a bit tame by any, like, you know, other era's standards afterwards.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching the 50s Blob.
As did I. But this is far more in my wheelhouse in terms of like...
This is taking that premise and going, let's make it real good.
Well, one of the things I always say about when we talk about 50s movies, or even some 70s movies even, but like, certainly with the 50s, I always talked about how they had a cool idea, and, you know, technology and all these other things weren't really there yet to pull it off in the way that you probably wanted to envision it in your head. And this is a case where a remake was probably a very good idea. Even, and the fact is this is one where, like, there's so many movies from the 50s and 60s and 70s where you might look at them and go, hey, that could probably do with a good remake now, you know, in present day 2020 whatever. I don't want this remade in present day, because if they remade this now, it'd all be CG. No. This is the perfect time period. No, that had to be done in the 80s. This is where it should end. This is the perfect version. We're ever getting a better one, we're done.
I think I agree with you. Like, I just, watching it was such a blast. And, like, even all the deaths were just so exciting and so, gruesome and gory. Like, there were parts where I usually like eat breakfast while I watch our movies, or like dinner. There were parts where I'm just not going to eat right now. They don't hold back.
Yeah, and it's got a couple of there's two moments in this movie that actually had me laughing properly, like buckling with laughter out loud. There's two moments that really
it's really funny.
Yeah, it's not like, because not all the acting's great. Some of it's, you know, kind of goofy acting, but this is a proper full-on B movie in every sense of the word, and it knows it's that. It wants to be the best type of B movie it can, and it goes for it.
And there's a wonderful movie theater scene. They really one-upped the movie theater scene.
Yes. Even the fake movie they're watching. In fact, one of my favorite laughs.
Yeah, that's I'm bringing up, like,
Yeah.
because the movie that they're watching is so adjacent to the Blob that you're just thinking, is this another kill that we're going to get? Like, oh, it's just making fun of a different horror film.
Yeah, but it cuts to the kids watching it. We'll get to the jokes. We don't want to say what those are till spoilers, but
yeah,
no, really good. There's a couple of great laughs that I really liked, and the effects are great. It's just over 90 minutes. It's
like the perfect runtime.
Yeah, it doesn't outstay its welcome. There's very little to complain about here.
There are some like rules that the Blob has established that whenever our main characters are involved, that it seemed to not work. those rules kind of went out the window, and
the one thing in particular I think you're really thinking about there is the sort of like almost jumping super speed that it has in some other scenes.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it doesn't have when our main characters are around. It's all
right, exactly. But and that's hard not to notice. But for the most part, like it's. I love all the abilities that the Blob has. It's really met its full potential.
There's a lot of tropes. There is one thing the Blob does that I don't necessarily love completely. There's kind of like almost tentacle-esque thing that it does sometimes that I felt like this feels like it's kind of betraying what the Blob is. It's becoming almost a different type of monster by having like tentacles at times. Now they're made of the Blob. They're still made of the goo, but.
Sure, and I think it's more just like the effects that they were using at the time. Like they're trying to make it seem like the Blob can stretch into anything, but it does kind of appear more tentacle-like instead of just the Blob stretching out.
Yeah, I think they look too dry. What I'd have liked is if like whenever it does this, there's just lots of goo dripping from it the entire time. Yeah, need more goo. They need the KY jelly expert off the side, just dunking it every take.
KY and raspberry jelly.
Oh dear.
I love how faithful it is to the original film, like how when the Blob first gets to Earth and the first person who interacts with it, and it's actually like almost scene by scene exactly the same. But then there's a crucial turn that happens.
There's a couple of fun little twists that I think, and actually I'll get into it more in spoilers, but there's a plot beat that we actually complained about in the original. We said that it didn't do anything with a certain character, and it actually doesn't do much with them in this, but it actually does more with the plot thread in this one than it did in the original. I'm talking about the kind of deputy. But we'll talk about that as well.
And the younger brother. You know, the younger brother was like, you know, he was that horrible child actor that they had in the first one who shoots at the Blob. They do a lot more with, like, you know, the younger brother is an important character in this one.
I mean, he's good comic relief, at least. I don't know about important. Important may be a stretch, but he's funny.
He's also like a little version of you. He loves horror films.
Yeah, and then his best friend's just like, you know.
His best friend might be a little bit more you, actually.
No, I don't know. The way the best friend was stupid enough to tell his mum what movie they were going to go see, and then starts describing, oh, it's your basic slice and dice. Like, don't tell her this. She's not going to let you go see it if you tell her what it is.
Yeah. I don't know. I have respect for that kid. Like, gets into horror films as like a 9-year-old.
Oh yeah, which is about the age I was, I think.
Yeah, you know, he has his ways, and yeah, my friend and I, we would go to movies every weekend, and we just push it like we're just gonna see. Like we were lucky, we both had a growth spurt pretty early, so we were very tall. We looked older than our age, and we would like push to see who would let us into the, you know, R-rated films or the films above our age.
Yeah.
And sometimes it worked.
Yeah, I'm fond of this movie. There's very little to complain about. It even keeps I won't say what it is, but it does keep the weakness to the Blob as well. The weakness from the original film is the same weakness in this one. So yeah, I think we'll probably ready to dive in and talk about all the kills and all that stuff. So we'll say spoilers. We'll work through the movie. But before we go into spoilers, I will thank our Patreon producers for the month. So I will thank Alison M. Fordyce, Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Short, Board Now, and Zammer Jammer. Thank you to you guys. They are all $20 patrons and above, which means they're producers and they get thanked on some of the shows, and they get their name in the credits at the end and all that jazz. But you don't have to be a $20 patron, of course. You don't have to spend that much to support us. This is above and beyond. Tara, why don't you tell them about what else they could do?
Yes, if you are fans of us and our reviews and you want to support the channel, help it grow, check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/MildFuzzTV, and donating as low as $1 per month will get you the Art LaFleur, oh, I screwed it up, Art LaFleur franchise, also known as Trancers, the epic saga. So, yeah, plus a ton of other movies that we have reviewed, B movies. If you're a fan of 80s Blob, then you'll probably enjoy watching those and watching them with us. So yeah, check that out. And if you donate $5 per month, you will get to vote on what we watch once a month, and you will also get these episodes a day early, plus a bunch of other extras for other shows that are on the channel. So check it out.
Solid.
Thank you.
Wasn't as entertaining as some of your messier ones, but
well, I'm in a good mood. We're talking about 80s Blob.
So yeah, so
I want to get to the spoilers.
Yeah, full spoilers for 1988. It's the Blob. So you know, as I say, it starts off like, it's like, if you wanted to know it's an 80s movie, it starts off on the high school football field. They're playing American football, and they're talking about the girl that he wants to ask out. And even
cheerleader.
Yeah, and even this leads to a joke where he gets kind of like the wind knocked out of him, and he sort of lands next to her, and he's like, "Hey, you got any plans tonight?" And then passes out.
Cute.
And even that made me chuckle. It was a fun little gag.
Yeah.
Which so I'll basically talk about all the character stuff that sets up before we get to the actual Blob stuff. Because the next time we see these two friends, right, that we're talking, you know, Paul's the main one who's going to asks out Shawnee Smith, right? So him and his friend. I should get his name because we talked about him. I seen on his own at one point as well. What was he?
Oh, the condoms guy.
Was he like Scott? Was that him?
I don't know.
The condoms guy will do. I guess condoms guy will do.
Yeah.
But they're in the store, right? And he's like, "Hey, Paul, can you lend me $5? I want to get some condoms. It's a sure thing tonight with whatever girl he's going to see." And he's like, "Okay, fine." And he hands him $5, and he goes up to the counter. And he, with pride, might I add, condom guy's like, and it's Art LaFleur's behind the counter. This is a really important detail for this.
Yes.
Art LaFleur's the guy who works in the store.
Pharmacist.
Right? He's like, "Hey, pack of Trojans, please, and something else." And you know, so the guy goes to get them, and he's just kind of like checking out the sunglasses in the mirror, and then out of nowhere, this priest shows up behind him, and he's like, "Oh, Father Meeker, how are you?" And he's just like talking and making small talk and talking about the church, and then guy comes back out holding, "Do you want ribbed or unribbed?" And he's like, "Ribbed." And then he says, "Oh, it's not for me, it's for my friend over there." And he starts talking about Paul. He's like, "Oh, it's for my friend." He's got a hot
date, yeah.
And he's he's you know, he's a bit of a bastard. He's going to pressure this naive young girl into doing things. And I said at least it should be protected, you know. And I forced them to come down here, and you know, like, and you know, and Art LaFleur behind the counter is listening to this whole conversation, occasionally asking a little question or two himself. And there's no payoff here, so I was actually kind of like, okay, it was mild that I'm using it. It was kind of making his friend out to be this weird like pervert, right?
Yeah.
But then we cut to the household with the two boys, right? And this is where the mum like hears they're going to go see a slasher movie in the theater and says, "No, you're not doing that. No way, not happening." And then it turns out, oh, this is where Shawnee Smith lives. And she's like, "Hey, Shawnee, there's the boys here." And Paul's at the door, and Paul comes in. She's like, "Oh, hey, Paul, come in. Nice to meet you. How about you come in and meet our father?" And it does this like slow tracking up to like the newspaper, because he's sitting there reading the newspaper, and the newspaper comes down, and I have to, and even though it's so predictable, I never actually thought of it. So when it revealed Art LaFleur's face, I started laughing so much because he looks up at Paul and he just has this face of like horror, and then just before the scene cuts, he goes, "Ribbed."
Yeah, pretty good payoff.
I was not expecting this movie to be that funny.
No.
I mean, because he doesn't, because
I don't really like Paul. You know, he comes off as someone who's like, I just want to take this nice girl out on a date. Like, he's funny. Like, he seems like I don't know, the guy you'd want to be friends with in high school.
Yeah, not the borderline rapist that his friend is. We'll get to that
No,
scene.
his friend is like, yeah, trouble, nothing but trouble.
Yeah, but no, just the reaction on his face, because in the previous scene when he's in the chemist, it's not like it would be really obvious, and maybe it's just for the fact that they wanted to have the joke and have it be a surprise, but it'd be really easy to have him kind of like say something like, oh, that's not, to bring up the fact that he's got a teenage daughter or something, and be kind of defensive, saying, no, hey, stop taking advantage, or don't pressure people.
He does seem to be really mad at Paul, like his character, like super fast, like what, were you never a teenage boy, like excited to go on a date with a girl and maybe get laid? But he does seem to, like, I don't know, he has like this rage behind his eyes, but he doesn't really say very much.
Yeah,
this is not his scene.
But it just all tracks when that newspaper comes down and you see his face. It's glorious. It's glorious. The other main character we're introduced to, of course, is Flag, which is Kevin Dillon's character. He's like the bad boy biker who doesn't go to school. He just tries to jump canyons or
a bridge,
or something.
A broken bridge with his motorcycle. He
just decks it immediately, and the homeless guy, who's also relevant. And this is something that I think this movie actually did pretty well, because I think one of the things that we said the 50s movie did well is it made you feel like the town was kind of like a small town, it was alive with all these different types of characters. And I think this movie actually pulls it off as well, in a different way, but it does do it. So, go credit.
No, I agree. I think it's pretty successful, because that was the charming thing about the 50s version. It's like there's like one cop that everybody knows, and there's like, the homeless guy that everyone knows who might be kind of crazy but still needs help. You know, they give him help when he needs it. And this kid is like he's our Steve McQueen, but he dropped out of school because he's cool. I don't know.
Yeah, he's the
he has a reputation.
He's the bad boy. Yeah. So we're introduced to him. We introduced to the sheriff, who asks out the woman at the diner on a date. And even he's very likable as he's doing this, because he's kind of.
They both are, yeah.
He's like, there's this concert. It's like, do you like country music? And she sort of turns around slowly. She realizes what he says. Like, hey, you're asking me out? And he sort of smiles and goes, well, yeah, I guess I am. It's just this moment of like, it's like he didn't plan this. He didn't sit and think about how he's going to ask her out. He's just kind of stumbled into it and like, you know what? I do want to ask you out. Yeah, let's do that.
Why not?
Yeah. And she gives him a little note saying that she's off at 11. So it's like, just likable characters, building them all up, and it's not before long where the thing lands, and it's the homeless man who starts prodding it with a stick, and it jumps up the stick at his arm, so it's on his arm, which again is very similar to what the original movie did. And instead
like scene for scene.
Of course, instead of it being like a doctor who has like a small clinic in his house, they go to a hospital in this one. And there's some social commentary here, because like they say, hey, this man needs some help. Because this is the thing, Paul and what's her character name, Meg, Shawnee Smith's character. They actually don't even get to have any of their date, because it's when they're driving to wherever they're going, they hit the homeless man with a car. And Flag's also there. He sees some of this happening.
And he grabs like an axe from like Flag's, I don't know, he's got like tools with him because he's working on his bike or something, and starts to hack off his arm.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
Like, this is like the first scene of gore that we get. He just starts to like try to hack off, and immediately the blob just covers the wound, so it won't let him like hack it off.
Yeah, and they take I mean, maybe, and this is kind of the thing, is like I would expect two random teenagers to be like, oh, let's take the homeless guy into the car and take him to the hospital. I was like, oh, that's very likable of you. Like, I don't necessarily buy that most people would. They just sort of run and not want anything to do with it. But there's a little bit of commentary here, because they go into the thing and they go up to the nurse and they say, hey, this man needs help. He's got something on his arm, and he's had a serious injury with an axe in his arm as well. And the nurse is just like, oh, does he have insurance? Like,
yeah, they see that he's the homeless guy, and they're like, we'll get to him.
Yeah. So, but the old commentary there. So Flag disappears, and they're left sort of hanging out, and Paul goes to get her a drink at the vending machine, and he happens to catch the homeless guy lying on like the bed somewhere, and he goes up and
moving really oddly.
Yeah, he goes up and he lifts the sheet, and he's got like a bulging bubble on his neck. It's like really disgusting.
Yeah.
And it's moving as well. That's the thing. It's actually kind of, actually pulsating. And he goes and gets the doctor, says, "Hey, I think that guy's like dying in there or something." Because he interrupts him because the doctor's with a patient, and he's like, "I'm with a patient here, young man," and he's like, "No, come on." And
someone's dying.
and when they go in and check on him, they lift the sheet properly, and the bottom half of his body's just gone.
Yeah, and the blob's not there, and that's like where we go, oh, this is not your mother's Blob film. Like, this is where the movie takes a very big turn from the first one.
You watched it before I did, and you messaged me saying this one's way more, what was the word you used? Grotesque than the first one. I believe "holy shit" was also added on at the end of it. Yes. And I saw this corpse that was like sort of there only in half though, and it's just that kind of grisly, like sort of at the abdomen. It's kind of like just goes into a bloody mess where it's been ripped off.
It's the next kill that I sent you that text.
Yeah, the next one's what justified your text, because I was like, oh, that was pretty gruesome, definitely more gruesome than a '50s movie, but I'm not like in shock by it or anything like that. Sure. And then so Paul, like the blob's on the ceiling and attacks Paul from, and he screams, and Shawnee Smith's like back in the waiting room, and she hears a scream and goes like, "Paul!" and she runs in, and what she sees is like Paul inside the blob, sort of trying to like escape with his face like sort
while
of
he's decomposing.
Yeah.
I'll say it again. Holy shit! It looked amazing.
It's like imagine someone's head's in like a paper bag, and they're sort of like pushing their face up against the edge of it and sort of like breathing in. It looks kind of like that, but it was like goo, and then like inside. Or
like, did you ever have that like putty when you were a kid that you can put on like a pitcher and then stretch it out?
I did not, but
it would like transfer an image like from a newspaper, and then you would have the face on it and you would stretch it out, and it looked kind of like that too, because he's decomposing and melting inside of the blob.
Yeah, that was great. It's a great
amazing
practical effect. I mean, honestly, it's probably the best practical effect in the movie, and it's not that the rest are bad, it's just that this is where it peaked. This was fantastic.
Yeah, this is where like we need to come out swinging.
Yeah.
They nailed it. It's great.
So straight up, there's been a murder here. So her parents come and pick her up. The sheriff's here, the deputy's here, and they actually arrest Flag pretty quickly and just assume that he's behind it because he was there at some point and left. Mm-hmm. And we get that the deputy's kind of against him. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, is that in the original, we said that the deputy had this thing where he never wanted to trust Steve McQueen, and there was never any kind of like payoff to it. Like not even like a scene where
it was just that we don't trust teenagers. Yeah. They're rambunctious. We don't believe them. Even though something's happening to the town.
But this movie actually does have kind of a payoff to it. There's like a sort of three-way standoff at one point where he essentially questions that maybe he's right, and he's not going to just like go against them. And it's not much, but it's like, no, that actually feels like a nice little payoff, because they set up that he doesn't trust them and he thinks he's this punk who's just up to no good. The fact that he's willing to start to maybe believe him was enough of a little thing that it made it feel justified that it was there.
Yeah.
So, credit where credit is due. So they take her home, and he's under arrest, but the sheriff lets him go because he's not a killer, like he's a punk, and he's done a lot of stupid little things, but this is not who he is. Because that's again Paul's body. Like I don't even think they have Paul's body because it's just inside the blob. The blob keeps whatever
and the blob
it absorbs.
Is gone. Yeah.
So, it's not long after this, because basically no one believes Meg of what's happened, and she goes to look for Flag, and he's actually already been let go because she was actually coming to bail him out. She whips out her credit card, and he kind of says something along the lines of like, they don't accept the credit card, and I'm like, I bet they do now. I bet in 2020 you can pay a card to like bail someone out.
Probably. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I've been in that situation, but
I bet you can now, though.
Nobody has cash.
Yeah, I bet you can totally. I bet it's contactless. I bet you just swipe it, or you just sort of press it against it, and that's it. It's done.
Yeah, probably.
Easy.
Over Google Pay or something.
Yeah, you go into the police station and like, hey, okay, this is our PayPal.
Do you take
address. Venmo? Oh dear. So they team up and they go looking for where it crashed, and this is where kind of not the big swerve, but this is kind of where it swerves kind of just in terms of content, because there's this like scientist dude with the military, and they're all in hazmat suits, these white hazmat suits, and they explain that they're under quarantine, they have to go back to town. They say it's a meteorite from outer space, which obviously is what we expect.
That's what it looks like too.
Yeah. So they're taken back in a van, and Flag kind of wants to escape. He's not up for sticking with them. But oh yeah, so
is this when we get the reveal? I think this comes later, but
oh no, I've glossed over. I think for some reason I thought this happened because they actually go straight to the restaurant after they get out of the police station.
Yeah,
when they meet up.
yeah.
So hold on, I need to rewind. Police, the diner stuff.
I don't know how Flag knows the lady who works in the diner, but
Small town.
yeah, he's like, I'm hungry, and they were closed, and she still like made him a sandwich or something.
Yeah.
And there's a guy working in the back.
Yeah, doing dishes and whatnot. No, I mean, she feels like she just knows him. She's like, all the stuff's turned off, but I can make a sandwich, and he's like, sure. This felt really realistic to me though, because she brings out some dessert. And he's like, oh, I can't pay for the dessert. You know, I can only afford the sandwich because I was hungry. And she's like, oh, it's on the house. And she says that, you know, it was just leftovers that was going to be thrown out. And the reason why this is relatable to me is that back when I was in high school, they served breakfast food at the first break, right? Like just rolls and you don't call it rolls. I don't know what you call it. Just basically sandwiches with hot food in them. And if you waited till after the bell rang and everyone else had left, you went up to the counter, there'd always be like leftover ones that hadn't been sold. You'd be like, hey, if you're going to throw them out. So
I would have done the exact same thing.
I might have blagged some free foods on a regular occasion in my day. So, you know.
Score.
Yeah. Well, because they're going to write it off anyway. It's going in the bin. Might as well just give it to me for free.
Yeah. Why not let somebody enjoy it?
Yeah, exactly. Makes sense. So while they're talking, though, they're kind of bonding a little bit, because obviously he's not someone who talks to her usually. We get this insane death in the back, where the blob comes up through the drain in the sink.
Well, the drain is like clogged in the sink, and so she's trying to use like a plunger.
Excuse me, I think you mean blobbed.
Stupid. So she's using like a toilet plunger to try to get it, and it's not working. So the guy's like, I'll get this. I'll take care of this. You go take care of the kid or whatever. Mm-hmm. You're right. It's an amazing death.
Yeah. Well, basically, the blob comes through the drain and pulls him in, and we see her
him into the drain.
Yeah, we see the reaction from her. We see her reaction. Honestly, the first shot where he sort of dives in, because it looks like what they've done is they've taken the bottom of the drain, the entire sink out, so that he can go further than he should, because it looks really, like, because it's cut straight to him just tippling in like that, it looks really funny. But my favourite part of it, though, is that once Flag and Meg run in, and we see just the feet. So I was like how,
they're still kicking.
How are they even still kicking? Presumably, if his waist is already through, then his legs won't be connected to anything to make them move anymore. I don't understand. The physics of this does not make any sense, but I don't care.
I like that the blob, like, once it gets attached to you, like, you immediately turn into goo also.
Oh, some good stuff later. In fact, yeah, this is probably a good time to talk about, because they run
Thanks,
off.
friend.
Yeah, because they run off out of the... Well, actually, we have to mention, there is the tease of the coldness stuff here, because they run into the freezer, and the blob tries to come out of the freezer, and it basically backs off, but whatever, a little bit of it that did stay there is crystals. It turns into crystals. And gets left behind, which is important because the priest ends up finding this and taking one of them in a jar. And after seeing like some evidence of the blob outside and being like, "Oh, Jesus, Mother, and Mary, this was prophesized." Was it? Was the blob prophesized in the Bible?
I didn't read that. Excuse me, that part of the Bible, but I'll take his word for it.
Yeah. If I have a disappointment, is that the sheriff gets killed off screen, because the diner lady gets killed here as well. She runs out into the phone booth and she's trying to call him. She's trying to call the sheriff. Yeah. And the blob surrounds the phone booth.
Gets surrounded by the pink goo.
It's a really good scene. Yeah. It's a really good set piece. And
she's trying to call him, and you see, and he's recognizable because you can the eyebrows. Yeah. That's why you hire a man with great eyebrows. And the sheriff badge, of course.
Yes. The sheriff badge
just
is the main
goes across that he's already being like decomposing inside, and I think the eyes move towards her like he's still somewhat alive, which I mean doesn't make sense at all, but I love it.
Yeah, it's just a brutal scene, and then obviously it crushes inside the phone booth, and that's her gone as well. Just completely absorbed from every direction. It's wonderful. You
guys should just do this on Screams anyway. This movie needs to be shared.
And that's what leads to the two kids running into the woods and then find the scientist. But yes, we should talk about the friend scene, the condom guy. So he's in the parked car with his date, and they're making out.
Easy lady.
And she's kind of like trying to pull away, and saying that's enough for now. And he's like, hey, you're wearing my ring. That makes you my girl, right? I mean, does that not count for something? He tries to kiss her again. She sort of pushes him away again.
And I think they're like drinking a little bit too.
They are drinking, yeah. And she's got the ring's like on a necklace, like around her neck. It's not like on her finger. And he says, hey, let me go get you some more drinks, right? And he goes to the trunk, and he lifts up the door, and it's so sleazy. He's got like a little tray of like multiple of these rings. He clearly has like a whole set of them to give out to different people. He's got like a little picnic basket.
Somehow he's slimier than the Blob.
I know. He's got like it's like
he's got like a little bartending set in his in his trunk. There's
a light that turns on when he opens like a fridge, and there's like stuff hanging up in the inside of the door for him to use. Like it's insane.
It's so elaborate.
Yeah, and he comes back round, and there's a little tease while he's doing this that the Blob might be just in her side of the car, and he comes back in and he thinks she's asleep, and it gets really sleazy here because he's sort of talking to himself, and he's like, he's pretending to talk to her. He's like, oh,
it seems a little bit more like she's not asleep, but like he's expecting her to be passed out because he probably drugged her.
Yeah, and he's like, hey, you that blouse is really nice, and he sort of touches it, and he's like, oh, it's really nice fabric. Oh, you hot? It feels just a bit hot. I'll undo a button for you. And he undoes one button, and then it's like, oh, this is going nasty places. Like, and I think what makes the scene work for me
is that you know that she's not drugged.
Yeah, but no. What I mean is that what makes the scene work for me is that he immediately gets come up. It's like as soon as he does the thing that's like way over the line where he puts his hand right in her bra. Like that's when he's grabbed by the Blob, and then her face turns around and it like concaves in, and everything just collapses inwards.
It's so amazing.
And that's him. He's dead. And it's like it's a wonderful. It's like, yeah, you made me hate that asshole just before. That's it. He's dead. Horror movie 101. It's great. It's great stuff.
I love how fleshed out the characters really are, though. Like they're all super likable or super not likable, but in a funny way. Like there's so many details in them that.
Do you know what I think what I appreciate is that for some of them, like the priest, for example, doesn't have a lot of scenes. He has maybe like 5 scenes total.
No, I mean he comes back in a big way, obviously, at the end, and he sounds like a super villain.
Yeah, but like but when he starts appearing though, his first appearance is so strong and setting up his like the way he talks and the way he is that every time he popped up, like everything felt like it was playing off of what I'd already learned about him. It's actually not a terrible piece of writing, even though it's in the wraparound of a goofy Blob
B movie.
Yeah. So anyway, so from here. Shawnee Smith's getting really upset because she's worried that her brothers are somewhere unsafe, and it's somewhere in this part of the movie where it cuts to the movie theater, and but we don't know it's a movie theater first. It presents it as just a scene of the movie, right, where we think, oh, this couple are out camping, and they're about to get it on, and maybe the Blob's going to come and get them, right? And then there's kind of a moment where like she says something or whatever, but then they notice someone over like cutting the hedges, right? Someone's hedge trimming in the middle of the night.
3 a.m.
And he's like, hey, I think we have a peeping Tom. And then she's like, well, let's give him something to peep then, shall we? It's like, all right.
It's super sleazy.
Yeah.
I love movies inside of movies. They're always just slightly more ridiculous than the one you're watching.
And then the scratches start appearing, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I get this. This is the horror movie the kids have went to watch. And you see them in the theater. And my favorite line of dialogue is in this scene. My favorite line where... So the guy cutting the hedges, right? He lifts up his head and he's wearing a hockey mask. Clearly this is taking the piss out of Friday the 13th. And the guy, the boyfriend of the two, yells out, but hockey season ended months ago!
It's wonderful.
I love this line. I was not prepared for it.
It's too bad you already did all the Jason films, because you could have used that line.
So I actually, it was funny is that I just randomly said that line on Twitter, right? I said I was watching the Blob. Tim responded to it, and when I got to that moment, I responded to his tweet saying, but hockey season was months ago. And
has he seen the movie?
He's seen it. Yeah, he likes it a lot.
Okay.
Within 30 seconds of me tweeting that, Matt commented on it saying, "What's this about hockey?" Because he's such a hockey fan, and he's like deprived right now because all the sports have been cancelled.
Watch the Blob. This film needs to be shared.
And I had to try and explain to him there's nothing to do with actual hockey. It was just a good joke. Oh,
Oh yeah.
I love it. I love it. So, and she runs to the movie theater, which I skip ahead a little bit because during this time, because the first time we're there, we cut to the projection booth, and it's the projectionist who gets blobbed first, and then like the manager.
The manager.
Yeah, he comes
It's
up.
in the air vent because for some reason the air isn't coming through.
Oh yeah, it was like,
the vents.
yeah, I forgot about this. There's like a POV shot of the blob coming up
Yeah.
from up through the vent. Oh, I love it.
Yeah, the guy sticks his head into the vent and but it's at the same time that the movie people are screaming, so nobody hears them. It's great. Oh, I pulled out my headphone.
I wouldn't say anything too important.
Intense conversation. My kitty cat screwed up my cat's sleeping.
Oh, poor cat. So obviously, the second time we go to the movie theater, Shawnee Smith runs in as everyone's running out because there's a guy behind the kids who's basically just describing what's about to happen to his like date.
Oh, he's the worst.
I know. Like
The worst guy in the film.
like you've already been to see this once, and your thought process to come and see it again was to just preempt everything that was going to happen to the person you're sitting with.
I know, and it's pretty ballsy of the kids to like turn around and tell them like to stop because those kids don't want to get kicked out. They're not supposed to be there. Like,
Also, the guy's got this big mustache. He looks like the sort of dude that you wouldn't. He's the sort of dude that might actually be unstable. You don't necessarily want to turn around and give him shit.
yeah,
And
definitely.
when they
I think
turn,
he's wearing a red hat in it too, which is just coincidence.
It's just coincidence. It's just red hats didn't mean that back then, but So, but the kid turns around to tell him to shut up again the second time, and as soon as he does, the blob just reaches down from above and pulls him up. It's and it's actually the shot of it coming through the projection window is actually very similar to like a moment in the original, if I remember right.
Oh yeah, definitely. The vent was different because I think it does come through the vent also in the theater, and remember, like it actually is like jam going through the vent and then oozing through it. And this one, he comes in through the ventilation, but it's like a big open thing.
Yeah.
So that iconic scene is kind of taken out. But but yeah, you're right. And I love as it's coming through the projector, like the whole theater turns red because the blob is like covering up the light.
It does that thing where the film burns and it goes white, but then it goes red. It goes like a pinky color because that's in front of the projector. No, it's really good. Love that. She ends up with the kids, and they end up like being chased by the blob down an alleyway and into a sewer. So we end up in a sewer for a chunk of time here. And she eventually gets the kids out. There's a great sequence where she sort of like they're having to climb up to like where a vent is, and the kids are small enough to get through, but she's not. So the kids get out, and then
one kid gets out.
Sorry, yes. Well, sorry, I do apologize. One kid gets out because the other kid doesn't have.
Her brother gets out, but her brother's friend, the one that snuck him into the theater, falls in the water.
Yes. Which is just distracting enough that she gets to fall in the water and make a.
Well, she goes after him because she's a normal human being who wants to save a child, and then it's like the end of the first Friday the 13th. The kid just pops out of the water like half decomposed at her.
Yeah, and then the blob starts coming out, and she has to run. And luckily,
this is one of the parts where I'm just like, oh, come on, like we already know you have tentacles. Like, why are you not using them now?
Yeah, I get it. Well, this
Maybe
is all
the water's cold.
Well, this is happening. Flag is actually eavesdropping on the scientist at the meteor site. This is where we learn the big twist of the movie, is that it's not a meteor. It was a science experiment done by the U.S. military that came crashing
during the
back
Cold
down.
War.
Yeah. And the head scientist is like, the whole town's expendable. We can beat the Russians with this. We've got the blob. We can contain it and send it to Russia.
I love the look of the scientists in their hazmat suits. It reminded me of, I don't know if you've seen Monsters Inc. of all things.
I've seen Monsters Inc.
When like the humans come into the monster world and the hazmat guys show up. That's what I kept thinking of every time I saw them. We have a 2314. I think that was the name of it, but like really cool.
So he because he hears that they're in the sewer, there's kids involved. I think he even knows it's her. He gets in his bike and he rides off to the rescue. And sure enough, he's able to like grab her and pull up a thing. They're still kind of in a sewer. There's a really fun little sequence here, which you can tell they didn't get a perfect shot of the stuntman doing it because they cut around it a bit too much. But there's a really fun bit where he has to go past the blob, who's kind of covering like half of this really wide sewer, and he kind of rides his bike up the side of the circular wall and down the other end. And you could kind of tell they had to cut around it a bit too much. Like there wasn't a good wide shot of the stuntman just doing it. There was like, you had to cut around. That's a shame. But
well, I think they also wanted to have the blob moving around in it, and they couldn't do it, I guess, with the wide shot without it looking too bad, probably.
yeah, I guess. But they get out. Although actually, they run into one of the scientist military dudes, and
Inside the sewer,
yeah, and he's freaking out, and his mask is damaged. And
Is it Jennings?
I thought it may have been actually, yeah.
He actually looked familiar, or his voice was familiar or something. I actually thought at first he was Peter Coyote because we just watched Sphere and he was in that. I thought, is that young Peter Coyote? Because he sounds like him. But I think maybe he. Oh,
I think something I know his voice from, or at least
what?
I don't know if he voiced the character or if he just played the physical part of it. But he's credited as Lord Zed from Power Rangers.
Oh. I mean, yeah, I did watch that show a long time ago.
Yeah.
Funny.
Also Finster, which was one of the other villains on that show. That's interesting.
Oh, he's a big baddie then.
Yeah, apparently. Whoa. Okay. There you go. So
I knew his name because for some reason the one guy, I guess he was expressing some kind of opposition to what our main Morgan Freeman guy is in the hazmat suit, and like he said, just watch what you're saying, Jennings or something. He says his name really intensely. I'm like, oh, I guess Jennings is an important character. Not really.
No. So basically, they find like an exit. They find like a manhole, and it's open, but the scientist is up there, and he's been kind of acting friendly to them up until this point. He's like, nah, seal it. No, we need to block it down the sewer.
Yeah.
And like the second the command's like, but my man's down there. Like one of ours is down there. And he's like, no, seal it. So you get the sense that the scientist is kind of the one who's the complete nut job. Everyone else is a bit more sensible than he is, but they actually seal it. And it just so happens that the scientist Jennings, who was down there, had a rocket launcher in his backpack.
Like a bazooka.
Yeah. And
why would you bring that into a sewer system anyway?
And Flag is
so closed.
Flag is like, okay, let me just fire this up the way. So he literally with one hand holds the bazooka in the vertical shaft for the manhole cover and fires up the way.
Which, first of all, would probably like evaporate them. But I did like that they shot it up at this, the manhole, and because I was expecting them to shoot at the blob. I'm like, that's a horrible idea. We know that you can't shoot at the blob. It's just going to go into many parts and then come back together or be multiple blobs. You don't want to do that. That's not how you defeat it. But I thought it was, I don't know, it was just kind of a surprise that they
because they actually, when I say they cover it, they actually put a truck on top of the manhole so they can't even push it up from underneath. So the truck blows up and they get out, and this is where the three-way standoff happens. And of course the blob gets the main scientist, drags him in. But it's like a tense moment where the deputy's like doesn't want to believe the bad kid, but he's questioning it. And by this point, all the townspeople have all been gathered. They're all at the church because they've all been like told to quarantine, and they're all there together. So her parents are there. The mechanic who talked to Flag earlier on, he's there. All these different characters. And it's actually when they're all running and there's big stuff happening. The blob's coming out and hitting things. Although I will mention that this is after a really stupid moment where a bunch of the scientists/military decide to all just stand at the manhole and shoot lots of bullets down into the sewer. Like that would do anything. I'm like, this is the dumbest American bullshit I have ever seen in my life. What is this?
It's a blob. You shoot at it, it absorbs it, and then decomposes it. Like what were you expecting? Like what do you shoot at? There's no vital organs. That's what makes it so scary.
But it comes up, and it's when they're running where sort of Shawnee Smith remembers the cold from earlier and uses the fire extinguisher. And basically once they're in the church, they start to like just have fire extinguishers like at all the exits, and they're trying to like get all the cracks in the door to stop it from coming in, which is actually where a deputy's had kind of his payoff. He gets a wonderful death here as well, where he's pulled out of the window, but he's bent backwards at the waist. Yeah,
it's really good.
Yeah, it's really good.
He's like folded like an accordion.
Yeah, and because back the way though, so it's even worse.
Yeah, it's like the drain kill, but yeah,
it's
an impossible move, but it's pretty wonderful.
But Flag's not in there though. Flag ran off to the garage because he knows that in there they're working on a snowmaker truck thing, and he's coming with that. He starts aiming at the blob, and he's doing all this. We get to a moment here where the truck gets flipped and the blob's kind of winning. Shawnee Smith runs up to like get him out, but she's grabbed like a rifle off one of the dead soldiers and grabbed like a pack of grenades, and she's up on top of the snowmobile, and she's like, you know, spraying into it, and she's saying, "Come and get it, you son of a bitch!" Right?
Yeah.
I laugh so hard. My third favorite laugh of this is that she puts the bag of grenades into the snowmakers, like, you know, because it looks like an oil tanker almost, but obviously it's all snow and cold that's in it instead.
Yeah.
And she sort of pulls the pin and goes, "Take this, you son of a bitch."
Yeah, she has a great like hero moment.
She has her badass line, or one liner. She has her, you know, "Smell you son of a bitch" moment from Jaws, and then she immediately gets her foot caught in something, and she falls over the side of the tanker, and it's like a vertical, like a
yeah.
It's like, you know when you fall,
it's hard. It's like a hard landing.
Yeah, see when you fall on the ground and your face hits the ground, right? Imagine that, but vertical, because she's at the top of a sort of round cylinder sort of truck object, right? So she sort of trips and like sort of goes more than just like, it's not just 90 degrees. She goes a full 180 almost, and smacks into the side of it.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's really funny though. I laughed out loud because she's like, "Take this, you son of a bitch!" Doink.
It's like a cartoon. I know.
So Flag has to come and get her, but once the truck blows up, it explodes with snow, and all of the blob turns into crystal. The town is saved.
The town walks out of the church, and it's snowing outside, and it's a pretty scene, and there's crystals everywhere.
And in the off chance they got enough money to do a sequel, there's a little scene at the end teasing how it's possible. Because there's actually a line here where they say that they need to get it to like a freezer quickly so they can keep it dead, implying that they even think that it might be able to come back if it heats back up. So we cut to the priest who's been all kind of like biblical, like this. We cut to him doing like this like radical sermon in a tent somewhere, and he's talking about the end of days, and we have to give ourselves to the beast and blah blah blah. I don't remember the actual dialogue, but it was
it's something along those lines.
Yeah, it was crazy stuff. And the final shot of the movie is him. He's still got that one little crystal he took from the diner in a jar.
Like one of the followers comes up and says, when will like a Judgment Day be or something? And he just says, "Soon."
Yeah, but of course it's not a crystal anymore though. It's actually moving around.
It's trying to get out.
It's a blob now. It's actually turned back into a blob. And
he's got like a Two-Face thing because he got burned in one of the explosions. And like he's got an eye patch and his face is all scarred up. His hair is slicked back and greasy.
Yeah, his hair's looking really messy, yeah.
Yeah, and he seemed kind of crazy before, but like when he delivers his sermons now, he's like full, like he's gone. Yeah. And yeah, he would make a great super villain. Like, it's sort of sad that we didn't get a sequel. Or maybe we did, I don't know.
I don't know.
Is there a Blob 2?
I don't think there is. I feel like I'd be aware of a Blob 2.
Yeah, it's okay. I actually really whatever Blob 2 will be is not as good as this, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it could be anything else. Yeah, it's just a blast of a movie. I like the kills are mostly really fun. The effects are really fun. Like I say, there's some stuff when the truck gets flipped over at the end, it's really obviously a miniature and it looks kind of goofy, but for the most part, the effects hold up pretty well. All the practical goo stuff where it's killing people all look great.
Yeah.
So it's hard to fault any of that. I don't know.
Nothing beats Paul's death right in the beginning, but like all the deaths, if they're not as good as that, they're all really fun.
It's really funny because the last couple of weeks we've been doing, Sunshine and the Sphere, and we've been talking about the themes and what this try to say about human beings, either successfully or unsuccessfully, respectively between those two films. Sure. And now this week is just now Blob is killing people in weird ways, and it's great.
Yeah, wonderful. I just had such a blast watching it. I like how the ending is a bit ambiguous, because even when you watch the original one, like the ending was, we're just going to take it to the Arctic, and so long as the Arctic is still there, like the Blob will be safe from the Blob.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
which is like dun dun dun, because it has the end with the question mark. on it.
And we joked because obviously climate change that's not as much of a sure thing as it once was.
Exactly. And now this one also has this ambiguous ending. Like, are we safe from the blob?
Yes. This priest is the guy who refuses to wear a mask right now. That's what he is. That's what he represents.
Judgment Day.
Oh God, no, really, really good stuff. I had a blast with this one. It's just I'm finding very little to fault on it. And I'm not going to give it like a perfect score by any means because it's still a B movie. It's still got some goofy acting here or there. It's still what it is. But it's really good fun.
It was way better than I was expecting it to be. Because even like when I rented it, it always has like the Rotten Tomatoes score on it, and it's fresh. It has like a 60%, but that seems low. Like this movie's like, who didn't enjoy watching this?
Yeah, I don't know.
It has to be people who are just like so adamant that the original one is better.
Oh, I looked up the director because I was curious what the director's done. The director, this was his second film. The first film he did was actually my favorite film in a franchise. He did Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors, which is wonderful. I love that movie. And then he went on to do The Mask, which you'll know. And then he did Eraser, which isn't a great movie, but I actually quite like that. As far as, I think it's a fun Arnold movie.
Yeah, it's a Schwarzenegger film.
Yeah. He also did The Scorpion King, though, which is definitely his low point.
Wasn't Eraser kind of like channeling Total Recall in a way? I think it is a science fiction film.
The only thing science fiction about Eraser I remember is the big sci-fi weird guns that they made. There was like, these new advanced guns, because the poster's literally Arnold dual wielding these big laser gun things, but that's like the extent of it, I think. Okay. If you want to justify it so we could do it on the show, I'm not going to argue with you that much. But...
I mean, it's an Arnold film. Yeah, of course.
I feel like Arnold films just get a pass.
All Arnold films are science fiction in some way. Like Kindergarten Cop, there's no way that Arnold Schwarzenegger would be a kindergarten teacher. That's science fiction.
I mean, I suppose we could just loosely say, well, I mean, it's science fiction and also other genre films as well. that are cult hits.
Sure.
We'll do those two.
He's your daddy, and what does he do?
There is no bathroom. Okay. All right, I guess we're at the point where we're going to rate it then. But yeah, I'm glad I checked out the director there, because Nightmare on Elm Street 3 is my favorite Nightmare film. I love Elm Street 3. So
I've never seen it.
I think it a lot. So no. What are you going to rate The Blob?
I thoroughly enjoyed watching this film, and I'm definitely going to watch it again and recommend everybody to watch it. And I've been recommending it since I watched it like 2 days ago to all my friends and family. I think it's a blast. Like, all the deaths are fun and like super grotesque and gory, and the characters are all interesting. Not all the acting's that good. Some of the special effects are not the best, but overall, like, this is a gem. It's a horror sci-fi gem that I think everyone should watch, and I loved it. So I think I'm going to give it an 8.5.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Do you know what's funny? After I watched it, my instinct was to just go straight 7.
Yeah.
Because I really enjoyed it, but ultimately the type of movie it is. Talking about it though, I'm kind of.
I think it's great.
I'm kind of. I'm not going to go as high as 8.5. I think, you know what? I think we've talked myself into an 8 though. I think this conversation has put it up to an 8 for me. I'll have to adjust my letterbox accordingly.
I might watch it again tomorrow.
It's a blast. I highly recommend The Blob 8. I really do. So there we go. So first things first, if you made it this far into the review, I want you to type the phrase "hockey season ended months ago" into the comments. I know it's a full sentence, it's a lot more to type, and I realize that, but I feel like
not just hockey season.
Hockey season ended months ago. That is the best line of anything I've watched in.
It's great because he's also
time.
delivering it with such a straight face.
Yeah, he's delivering it almost like that famous clip from Troll 2 where he's like, "Oh my god, they're eating her, and then they're gonna eat me. Oh my god!" Like he's got that kind of cadence. intentionally so, and I feel like that made the whole work. So yeah, put that in there. I'm going to ask Tara to do her pose now. So I'm going to, this is for the thumbnail. I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1 and say pose.
Are you okay with hands?
You can do hands. Just make sure they're only cut off at the bottom and not the sides. Same with your head.
Okay.
Right. So yes, if you want to do hand things, yes. So here we go. 3, 2, 1, pose. All right.
Hopefully you can work with it.
I may have to make you do that again afterwards because you moved a bit too quickly, but you won't do it again at the episode. It's fine.
Okay.
So there you go. That is that. I'll tell you what's coming next week. I checked before we started. The current schedule has us returning to Planet of the Apes next week for Beneath the Planet of the Apes. So look forward to
two good movies in a row.
We'll see. We'll return to that franchise with a Charlton Heston cameo and some other stuff. So look forward to that. Please do like though if you're on YouTube. Liking is really important. It lets the YouTube algorithm know that we're worth recommending out. So please do. You can comment, of course. You can subscribe. All these things. We mentioned Patreon earlier on. If you want to, support us financially, you can go to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Otherwise, though, I would say get us on Twitter at the Ace Podcast. Tara, would you like to recommend any other MailFuzz TV content to people?
Well, if you're a fan of science fiction, we are currently working through the new season of Twilight Zone for some reason. So you can hate watch it with us. And who knows? There might be some gems. We've only watched one episode so far.
In addition to the old stuff too, so we've got both of them running alongside.
Yeah, and if you are a fan of Twilight Zone, we are watching the original ones right now, so you can watch it with us and watch a good Twilight Zone series.
So there you go. That is that. Is there anything else left to tell you before I wrap up the show? I don't think so. I think we've done it. We've
watch the Blob 88.
We've blobbed our way through this blobby review and we're ready to blob out. So thank you very much for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Science Fiction Guys and Computer at Salsa.
But hockey season ended months ago.